Hi, I'm Mark Honeybone from Property Ventures, and welcome to our podcast, where we interview prominent members of the investment community along with other professionals in the New Zealand property market. To check us out, take a look at propertyventures.co.nz. We hope you enjoy today's podcast.
Hi and welcome back to the New Zealand Property Podcast and Video Series sponsored by Property Ventures Real Estate, of course. Now we've got Sarina Gibbons sitting next to me. Welcome, Sarina.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Sarina is one of my favourite property people in the whole of New Zealand. She's very generous with her time and she helps thousands of people in Auckland with property, being the key person, I'll say, of the
Keep going.
Auckland Property Investors Association.
We did not script this.
And no, she's lovely and she means really well, and I'm pleased to have her here today to help you. Got a lot of you people who will be listening to this, and of course many of you listening to this are property investors, and we all own property. And from a guy like myself, I used to own my own property management company about 15 years ago briefly. I know nothing about rules and stuff anymore, and rely on other people to do that for me. It's a lot of rules. And there's things you can and can't do, and maybe in the deep dark old days when I used to run a company, we could do, or we couldn't. I'm not sure. But what we're going to talk today is talk about unenforceable clauses within the RTA and what you can and can't do. And it's a very important thing that Sarina's talking about at the moment with people, and very dear to her heart, and that's why we're here. So just to get things started, so for those who don't know, the RTA is the Residential Tenancies Act, and am I right in assuming all landlords have to follow the rules? It's not just the property managers out there?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. So thanks for having me, by the way, and helping us spread the words of what we are doing. Going back to your question, yes, so the RTA, with a few exceptions, governs most residential tenancies in New Zealand. And really the people who are liable under the RTA are your tenants, your property manager, and your landlords. And what we're finding out by talking to our members who are landlords with property managers is that there's often this assumption, this incorrect assumption that if you have a property manager, that manager is entirely liable for his or her action or inaction, when in fact the property manager is merely acting as your agent. So when you have a property manager, you yourself is liable for their conduct vis-a-vis the tenancy. So I think this is, in terms of knowledge of the Residential Tenancies Act and tenancy law in general, it is something that is super important, not just for property managers to be aware of, but also their landlord clients.
And I guess like every business, not every property manager is like another property manager, I guess. So the responsibility is back on us, the owner of the property. We shouldn't have some basic knowledge of what's going on.
Yeah, and I think the sort of rule of thumb to always remember when it comes to this principal-agent relationship within tenancy is ultimately you can outsource the responsibility, but you can't outsource the accountability of it. So your property manager is simply acting as your agent, and you need to, in this unregulated environment, and look, regulation isn't going to happen until 2026 at the earliest. It is under consultation now, but the law is expected to embed fully by 26. So we are still going to be operating for the next few years in an unregulated environment. And I think it's super important for landlords to be savvy customers in that property management space and be very aware. I think we're talking about unenforceable clauses today. So you need to be very aware that the residential tenancy, while it is the governing law of New Zealand and it marks out the parameters within which you can contract with your tenant, whether directly yourself or through a property manager, through the actions of a property manager, you need to know where are the no-go zones of these parameters of the RTA has set down, so that everything in your tenancy agreements are in fact enforceable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course you want that done, that's for sure. So obviously you can't contract out of the RTA. So what's the big deal?
Yeah, it's a big deal because I've been involved with the property sector for so many years, and I feel like every one of us knows to say you can't contract out of the RTA. Everyone says it. Everyone says it out loud. But when I look into it and when I reflect on all the tenancy agreements we've come across in the course of our work, and in the course of studying and becoming more well-versed with the RTA, like studying tenancy tribunal adjudications, for example, and getting feedback from the tenancy compliance and investigations teams, is very apparent to me that while we all know to say you can't contract out of the RTA, many of us don't actually know what it means. And I'll give you an example. I think, most landlords you speak to these days, if you say, when you talk about unenforceable clauses and you say, hey, we all know we can't contract out of the RTA, many of us straight away think to the professional carpet cleaning clause, which used to be super popular.
Yeah.
And you will go to like meetings at APIA, for example, or the tenancy group, property groups, and people will be like, oh, let me tell you a hot tip. You need to be telling your tenants to professionally clean their carpet on exit.
We used to do that 15, 20 years ago.
Everyone did, right?
And then the groups and get told to do that.
Yeah, and then about I want to say maybe 5, 6, maybe even longer, but 5, 6 years ago, it became very apparent, the penny dropped, and many of us became aware that actually no, you are by making your tenants incur the cost of professional cleaning, in most cases, you are imposing on the tenant a liability that's more onerous than what is required by the RTA, which is one of the sort of big principle of what would make a clause unenforceable. So then within the PIA network, we started educating our members, and words got out there that okay, you can't have a clause. If you have a clause in there about professional cleaning, take it out now because it's unenforceable. You'll get, it just doesn't look good if you do that. And also you don't want to start off a tenancy giving your tenant the wrong impression of what they're really liable for vis-a-vis the tenancy itself. But then over time, it just became an almost lazy handhold. That every time, when I speak to landlords, every time they talk about unenforceable clauses, not contracting out of the RTA, they straight away think to the carpet cleaning clause and think to themselves, all right, my standard is therefore, if I don't have that clause in my agreement, I'm good. But in fact, there are many other different ways you can put an unenforceable clause in your agreement. And a lot of the times, you probably don't even know it. And I think given how complex the RTA has become in the last few years, just the layers of complexity means that many of us are inadvertently breaking Section 11, which basically says you can't have an unenforceable clause in your agreement.
Okay. Obviously, getting someone to pay to clean their carpet is an unenforceable clause. You sort of have expanded on it, I guess, quite a bit, but you want to go a wee bit further on what actually makes a clause unenforceable. I guess it's by knowing what the rules of the RTA are.
Yeah.
What you can't do. Is it about making them spend more money, or is it nothing to do with the...
Generally, it's a good starting point. So generally, anything that shifts a landlord's obligation under the RTA onto a tenant would on the face of it make it unenforceable. Now, I use the phrase on the face of it because if you look at Section 11 of the Residential Tenancies Act, which is about unenforceable clauses, it is not an absolute ban on anything that contravenes the RTA has this very ethereal way of dealing with tenancy issues, and it always gives the tribunal a way out to interpret the law based on principles around, the natural justice, the interest of the parties, that sort of stuff. So if you look at Section 11, it is a ban on unenforceable clause, but there's a subsection in there that talks about if a tribunal adjudicator decides on, on balance of the party's interest, the nature of the circumstance itself, that it would be just to allow an unenforceable clause to be enforceable, it will order that to be the case. It doesn't happen a lot, but in general, per Section 11, basically anything that contravenes or is inconsistent with rules of the RTA would, on the face of it, be unenforceable. Now, there are other things that makes a clause unenforceable as well, be it things like, in general, interfering with your tenant's ordinary use of the property as a residential premises is generally unenforceable. So for example, we're in my home right now, right? I use this premise and ordinarily use it for residential purposes. What does that mean? Part of it is having friends over. I mean, I'm not a renter, but part of it is natural. You're in your home, you have your friends over. Now, if you have a clause in your tenancy agreement that says your tenant is not allowed to have visitors, or is not allowed to have showers after 9 o'clock, so all that sort of house rule situations, clauses, most of them are unenforceable because you're interfering with your tenant's use of the home as a home. Now, another thing that is going to make your clause unenforceable is if the landlord acts outside of his or her authority as a landlord. So by that, I mean things like if you seek to circumvent the tribunal adjudicator's authority to award damages and penalties in case where your tenant had breached a tenancy agreement. So then you are denying the tribunal the ability to exercise that authority. You are actually, in fact, taking over that decision-making process. So clauses that are to the effect of, for example, if tenant does A, then I'm entitled to charge a penalty of X amount. There is a prohibition of damages and accelerated rent clause section in the tenancy agreement anyway. So you're breaching that, but you're also breaching the tribunals. You're also incurring into the tribunal's ability to adjudicate these cases based on the facts. So those clauses are generally unenforceable as well. And another one that I think I see a lot disturbingly are clauses that somehow lead to immediate termination. Again, you are circumventing the RTA's many rules to terminate a tenancy. So generally anything that talks about if you do this, I get to immediately terminate, you can't have that either.
There'll be a lot of people watching this who will have room by room type rentals and what have you. That they fall under exactly the same rules, I believe, now as they used to. Or
are we talking room by room or boarding house?
Well, we'll talk about both.
So anything, interestingly enough, I'm glad you brought up a boarding house. So there's even adjudications out there that have picked up on landlords of who's essentially running a boarding house, but sought to evade boarding house rules because there are a set of special rules for boarding houses under the RTA. So in order to evade the boarding house rules, the landlord went and signed, I think, the case I'm thinking of, I think he went and signed 7 identical, almost identical contemporaneous agreements with 7 different tenants for the same property. And when that came in front of the adjudicator, it was really clear that all of those agreements are on the face of it unenforceable. Obviously, the adjudicator would look at, how do you then interpret the boarding house agreement in as consistent a way as he could with all the agreements, but all the agreements were by that adjudication. No. So can't have that.
No, exactly. And in fact, room by room, yeah, in fact, it's just normal RTA stuff anyway. You can either have a house or a room to rent, so they're under the same rules. So,
but room by room, you still need a tenancy agreement.
yeah, it's the same. They fall under exactly the same rules.
So you still can't tell them not to have a shower after 9 o'clock.
Yeah. It's always taking away their rights. Some of those things. That, I guess that's what the RTA are trying to avoid happening. But
and it's making sure that you are not. You're not inadvertently taking advantage of the tenant, and also making sure that the tenant isn't, in the start of the tenancy because of this imbalance of bargaining power. Because we're in this environment now where there's a rental housing shortage in a lot of centres, and the tenants are, I deal with tenants who literally do not read tenancy agreements, and they just sign. And those people who act out of economic or social anxiety, they need protection as well.
Definitely. Okay, well that's a few unenforceable clauses. Is there what's some enforceable clauses that you want to mention?
I'll be honest with you, not that many.
Not that many.
Unfortunately, no.
On. Surely the landlords are protected. Don't the government want us to protect us?
And look, pretty tame ones, you can still have, obviously. Things around if your property is a no smoking property, then you're entitled to have a clause in there that prohibits your tenant from smoking indoors. You can't stop them. You can't stop anyone from smoking outdoors. But you can have an OPET clause that's perfectly fine. You can still put in there maximum occupancy number, which not many, unfortunately. It's another thing that I see people talk about a lot, but I don't see it a lot in agreements that come across my desk. So, if you're worried about wear and tear, that sort of stuff, and also certainty of who is at your property, maximum numbers is a good maximum occupancy is a good thing to put in there. And look, if your property is governed by body corporate rules, for example, obviously the tenancy agreement assumes that the tenant would have to abide by body corporate rules, but there's nothing stopping you from, if the body corporate requires that cars are not parked in a certain area, there's no harm reiterating that in the tenancy agreement, super enforceable. You don't have to, but because it's already exists under the body corporate rules, but no harm.
Yep. Yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Just a personal situation that I've seen recently, where someone's renting out a place that's, I won't say it's fully furnished, but it's worse than fully furnished. He's locked stuff away in cupboards and stuff that they can't use, and have said they can't use it, and you can store stuff other places. Is that an enforceable rule? Can someone say that? And you may not know the answers off the bat, but so they've said you can't use a garage, you can't use a shed, you can't use even some cupboards within the house because my furniture's in there. Can someone do that? I suppose they've got the right to do that.
That is interesting. The tribunal is split on the face of it, and I think this is a really annoying thing about the RTA, is just generally not a definitive answer that covers 100% of cases. But
sounds like the REA, but we're not begging our
Oh my
authorities.
God, right? Like, just to keep things interesting. So on the face of it, if you have, especially, it's not uncommon for, say, for example, landlords storing things in the roof, especially people who are ex-home owner occupiers, right? And they store their things in like maybe one room out of 4, or under the house. That sort of stuff generally is fine. Even garage is fine. So like if you clearly sort of earmark areas that are no-go zones for your tenants, that is enforceable, that's okay. However, I've also come across adjudications where, and the one I'm thinking of, I'm not super convinced by how the adjudicator had contorted himself or herself to arrive at the conclusion that he or she did. But I have also seen, that particular adjudication talks about the unenforceability of these no-go areas, but it's more because it is specific to the property itself and the amenities. Right. So from memory, it was something like they blocked off a room, but the tenancy was for say there's only one room left over, but the tenancy was for like four people, then there's a health and safety situation there. But in my mind, it is not uncommon for landlords to have an area reserved for their private belongings, and it's all locked up, unavailable to the tenants. That's perfectly fine.
Well done, a well off the cuff answer. Okay, so some landlords are sitting watching this going, I still don't care, I'll just go with the flow. There's obviously some penalties for unenforceable rules being put on there now. How severe are they?
So breaking Section 11 itself, which is, again, a reminder to all the viewers out there, it is the clause that prohibits you from having unenforceable clauses in your agreement. Breaking Section 11 itself is not unlawful per the RTA. So that's not going to attract you with a specific penalty. So not all unenforceable clauses will get you in hot water. Most of the time, the tame ones, so for example, if you have a set break lease fee in your agreement at the start of the agreement, that itself is unenforceable because the law only allows you to be reimbursed for reasonable expense should there be a break lease, right? So you can't at the outset say, I want $500 if you break lease early. If that happens, the adjudicator would simply put that aside, cleave that out of the agreement, and try to deal with the dispute in as consistent a manner as he or she could, based on what's left of the agreement. So the tame ones, it just gets put aside, it's fine. It's not a great look. It certainly paints a picture of you being a certain type of landlord or a certain type of property manager. In cases where, the one I mentioned before about immediate termination. So say I've seen clauses, unfortunately more common than I would like to admit. I've seen clauses out there talking about if there's a noise complaint made against you, I get to immediately terminate.
Right. Okay.
Or if you there's a police attendance, I get to immediately terminate.
Right.
Those immediate termination clauses actually breach section, I believe, 60AA, which is when a landlord purports to terminate, acts to or purports to terminate a tenancy without just cause. So outside of what is allowed by the RTA. The maximum fine for that is $6,500.
Wow.
So it could go from no consequence to a lot.
Several $1,000s.
Yeah, painful.
Yeah. Okay, so that's why you need to do that. So obviously you by the sounds of it, you're dealing with a lot of people, or are people coming to you, or you're obviously seeing this be breached quite often, or not even breached, just investors not knowing.
Quite often, and I got to say, disappointing to discover. It was an inadvertent discovery, really, for our team. We were sort of in the midst of doing other things, and then we just started seeing this pattern emerging of seeing a lot of unenforceable clauses. And I think the most alarming thing as well is it's not just the landlords doing it's not just your handwritten clause at the back of a tenancy services agreement. It's not just that. We're even seeing it coming out of training agencies for property management. So people who hold themselves out as legal experts who are capable of giving adequate training are giving their clients unenforceable clauses written in legalese. So for most people, for me as well, when I first see those clauses, I'll be like, oh yeah, it's a lawyer's talk, it's probably enforceable. And then when you look into it, alarmingly it's not. So it's actually, I think it's a bigger problem than we realize, or if we even care to admit.
So some solicitors are probably even doing this on behalf of people, as you said, or property managers. I guess as soon as the property management world gets regulated, I guess like the real estate world is now, it's people are held accountable for it. Professionals, exactly. the better, I guess. So.
Yeah, exactly. And if you log on to a lot of the tenancy forums or landlord forums online, you regularly see newbie landlords come online and go, hey guys, help me out, new tenancy, how do I get my hands on a pro-landlord agreement? And I can tell you, Mark, I see a lot of those pro-landlord agreements. I want to say most of them are underwritten by unenforceable clauses. So, what's the point?
So we've got something for you. The ARPA, the Auckland Property Investors Association, has launched a new service called Checkmyclausecom.co.nz.
Yes.
So tell me, I think we know where this is going, but tell me about it.
I think it's as we've made it as sort of plainly spoken as we could. So Checkmyclause.co.nz is a free service we are doing because we are just so super concerned about the extent of and the frequency of unenforceable clauses in the market. We don't think it is a good look for the rental sector. We don't think it serves landlords, and it's certainly a disservice to tenants. So it is a service that is open to anybody who is in the rental sector. So I don't care if you are a landlord, a property manager, or a tenant, or just a nosy person who has nothing better to do. You can hop on over to the website checkmyclause.co.nz. It is a simple form you fill out, and literally we would just go through the clause that you copy and paste for us and give you a perspective on whether we think the clause itself is enforceable or unenforceable. We're not going to be writing you like War and Peace. Obviously, there's going to be a bit of disclaimer in there. It's going to be, we will outline things like, we assume we assume your tenancy to be of certain aspects and to have certain features. And if our assumptions are correct, then in our view, this agreement. And I gotta say, this service has been live for a week. We've gone through. I think we've just passed our 10th clause, and with the exception of one, which was redundant rather than unenforceable itself, all the other ones have been unenforceable. Just to give you an extent of how big an idea of how big the problem is.
Yes, it is a big problem, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great, and we appreciate you coming on the show talking about that today. Before we do a bit of a push about the ARPA, what's anything else you want to cover?
That's like the best bit of my job. No.
Anything else you want to cover with the I think you covered that really well. And at the end of the day, you've got a problem, you're not sure, just go to checkmyclause.co.nz and Sarina will hopefully be able to help you. And if she can't, she'll let you know.
Yeah, and I think the cool thing people should know is for the time being anyway, I think long term we've got to be looking at how do we automate the service to make it as efficient as possible. But for the time being anyway, it literally is a person sitting inside the vending machine making your coffee for you, customized to whatever you ordered, right? So for the time being, it literally is my humble self at the other end, answering and giving you some perspective on that. And as time goes on, we are going to build a data bank and put a bot in place, which just makes it a little bit more accessible for more people.
And that's why I love Sarina and ARPA. Also, there is a fee to join ARPA, but love Sarina does. You're getting service here for nothing apart from the goodwill for protect landlords, which is great. So just in 20 seconds, tell us about ARPA. Those who don't know, the Auckland Property Investors Association. There's associations like this all around the country, so in your area, anywhere around New Zealand, but the Auckland one's a pretty special beast.
Thank you.
Quick 20 seconds sale.
Sure. So we're a not-for-profit incorporated society. We're primarily volunteer-driven, and it really is just a community of like-minded, thoughtful, incredibly kind, energetic property investors who get together on the regular talking about all sorts of issues around tax, finance, politics, tenancy, all that sort of stuff. We help people get engaged with government. We help people, Mark is a super regular speaker who talks to our members about how to not make stupid decisions about your investments.
I've made them all, so I just spread it around.
Well, exactly, and that's the cool thing about the community is we're able to tap into good people like yourself, where we sort of go, hey, come tell us all the dumb things you've ever done in your life that you would never do again. And because a lot of people, it's like, I'm not doing that. It's hurting my brand, right? Yeah. But I think because it is just that really sort of community orientated spirit that we all want each other to do well. Everyone is really generous with their experience, and hopefully from that it kind of boosts your confidence, boosts your energy, helps you make good decisions going forward. And yeah, that's basically just a happy place for investors.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, that's good, and recommend anyone in the Auckland area to do that and join APIA. Just a wee story to finish off, see how we all work together, I guess, and it's just doing it for the right reasons. Is we had a young chap in their office about 3 weeks ago. I actually never spoke to him. A new bull team spoke to him, and he's doing a small development about 1 to 7 or 1 to 8, and he wants to do a couple of pre-sales and sales and wants to use us to help him, which is great. So he told my 2 staff that he learned about property from the New Zealand Property Podcast series, the one we listen to now.
So
he thinks I'm all right, but he learned everything what to do through this. He joined APIA. I met him again twice at the Ponsonby get-togethers that I help out.
Oh, nice.
And he did that, and he ended up back in our office using us to help him. That he's super proud and excited about a project doing, and going, that's a pretty cool story when you do things to help people, I do things to help you guys for nothing,
exactly.
and it's pretty cool. So that's,
and it's that concept, like no man is an island, right? And we really embrace that in this community, where we sort of just draw everybody in and build our networks out, and I think over the years we've just put out so much good energy. I really am starting to see, in the last few years, especially with COVID, really starting to see a lot of positivities being reflected back within the community. That's a massive difference for people. Yeah.
I love that. Yes, there's some sharks in the business. There's sharks in every business, but there's some good people around.
Yeah,
and there's one of them there.
Good people magnets.
Absolutely, they do. All good. Thanks very much for your time, Sarina.
Thank you.
Good luck to you, and good luck for the Auckland Property Investors Association this year. And we will see you again soon. Keep watching. We'll keep bringing you interesting and lovely people like Sarina. And have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank
Thanks,
you guys.
Sarina.
Bye.